We need to get into some coaching staff news for Mississippi State because the Bulldogs made 3 assistant coach hires. We'll run through the first one kind of quickly here. That being the addition of Desmond Lindsey as an assistant wide receivers coach. A Mississippi native from Taylorsville, has coached in the state extensively from going back to his start as a wide receivers coach at MGCCC down in Perkinston, or if you're in my neck of the woods, we call Mississippi Gulf Coast, we call it Perk. Multiple stops at Southern Miss along the way. Was also at Memphis, Arkansas State. Most recently was the outside wide receivers coach at UTEP last season. Mississippi native, a guy who has recruited the state extensively, has plenty of those ties within the state, and a guy that has had some productive receivers, especially if you look at his time when he was at Southern Miss and at Arkansas State, some talented receivers that he was able to coach up. Not going to be the primary receivers coach for Mississippi State. This is just an assistant role, which these days, with the way that you're able to run these coaching staffs, you can basically have as many guys on staff as you want. And if you wanted to have an assistant coach for every single position that is not the actual position coach, you're able to. And it looks like Mississippi State is sort of trending towards doing that a little bit here. Obviously, Keevy Thompson as an assistant coach for the secondary was one of those moves made earlier. A couple other additions that we'll get into here. We'll see what type of roles that they hold. But I like the move. You get a Mississippi recruiter onto staff, which is a big part of things. Obviously, losing Chad Bumpus, who that was kind of, his role as a receivers coach was mostly being the Mississippi guy and getting the players within the state to come and commit to Mississippi State and have those ties to those players. Obviously, this guy's not stepping in and replacing Bumpus because you still are going to make a hire at receivers coach, but his role could handle some of those same duties when it comes to coaching players within this, recruiting players within the state of Mississippi. So a nice addition to the staff. Sticking with offense, and this is a move that I'm really excited about. Kevin Johns comes in as an assistant coach for the offensive side of the ball. Not an official role announced just yet, whether or not that's going to be as kind of what I was just talking about, just an assistant on staff, or whether or not he will have positional duties. But this is a guy that I think is really an outstanding hire for MSU. So Johns most recently was the quarterbacks coach at Oklahoma State this past season. Did have to take over play calling halfway through the season once Gundy was fired, and the then OC, cannot believe I'm blanking on his name because he's an air raid guy, and I'm supposed to know those dudes. But the OC at the time got promoted to head coach and gave the play calling duties to Kevin Johns. But in 2024 was an offensive analyst at Oklahoma. Prior to that, it was like 13 years in a row of being an offensive coordinator at the FBS level. He was at Duke for a couple years with Mike Elko. He was at Memphis under Mike Norvell, and also under Ryan Silverfield. He was at Western Michigan for a season. He was at Texas Tech for a season with Cliff Kingsbury. And he had a nice long run at Indiana for multiple years there, first as a co-OC and then becoming a full-time OC. And this is a guy that has had productive offenses every step of the way. Every time he has been an offensive coordinator, his offenses have been incredibly productive. You look at Duke, he did a great job with Riley Leonard. Duke went from being like the bottom scoring offense in the ACC to being the ACC's 5th best scoring offense in his first season there. Memphis called an outstanding offense during his 3 years there, worked with some really good quarterbacks in Brady White and then freshman Seth Hennigan. And again, Texas Tech, his Western Michigan offense was very, very good. His Indiana offenses, especially in 2015, was a very good unit. He's got ties to a lot of really good offensive minds with a time working with Seth Luttrell. I am blanking on Kevin Wilson, the head coach at Indiana at the time, who is kind of a crappy coach, but Kevin Wilson is a guy that was an innovator in the sport when it comes to sort of developing the power spread offense. But worked alongside Seth Luttrell, who's off the air raid tree, with Cliff Kingsbury off the air raid tree. Mike Norvell, who again has some sort of that power spread option background. And then in 2024 got some experience kind of in the veer and shoot, because while Jeff Levy had left Oklahoma that season, OU kind of promoted from within and sort of kept a lot of what they were doing offensively, at least from a philosophical standpoint and terminology standpoint. A lot of that stayed the same. So he was introduced to some of the system that he's going to be coaching now with Levy. He is a proven coach as an offensive coordinator, has a ton of really impressive ties to various systems, and has implemented all that into his offenses. He's had years where it's been a pass-happy, wide-open attack. He's had years where they've been heavy run. He's had dual-threat quarterbacks. He's had pocket passers, and he's had success no matter how he's done it. He's had running backs put up huge numbers, receivers put up huge numbers. He's got extensive work as a quarterbacks coach, extensive work as a wide receivers coach. And he is someone that back in 2023, when Mississippi State was hiring an offensive coordinator, I thought would have been an outstanding hire, because he was someone that, the word had gotten out. State was ready to make a move away from the air raid, that Zach Arnett did not want to hire a guy who was an air raid OC to come in. He wanted someone that could transition the team away from that and sort of start running a different system, which that was a mistake that proved costly. But Kevin Johns was someone that I thought would have made a lot of sense because, as I mentioned, he has ties to the air raid, working alongside Seth Luttrell, working alongside Cliff Kingsbury. He had been in the system. He would have understood a lot of the terminology. He would have understood a lot of the concepts and how they like to run those things. And he could have taken those ideas and then meshed them into maybe more the direction Zach Arnett was imagining. And again, he was coming off a very good season in 2022 at Duke, and the work that he did there felt like a guy that would have been a really great hire for Mississippi State at the time as an offensive coordinator. So I have a lot of respect for this guy as an offensive mind in the sport. We're talking about him coming in as being an assistant coach for Mississippi State, potentially a position coach. We'll get to that here just in a sec. But kind of in the same way with Bush Hamden, who State hires, with a very different background than Levy, has been the OC before, been a quarterback's coach, been a receivers coach, well-respected, but not a guy who is coming in to call plays. But it's someone who can step in and bring ideas to the room, someone who could step in and bring some different philosophies that someone like Levy can trust to delegate to. Christian, I think this is a really smart move. You're getting a quality coach in the room, and even if he's not going to be a play caller, which he's not, Jeff Levy is going to call the plays, and State's not changing the offense. It's Jeff Levy's offense. But this feels like a really smart move to get another really smart offensive mind in the meeting rooms.
He's definitely made some good moves this week with these coaching hires. And, I think just being able to bring these guys in that have experience around college football, a little bit in the NFL, anytime you could get that at Mississippi State, really anywhere, that's huge. And, this is not Mississippi State who's going out trying to get the big names to be like the Alabama and Georgias of the world. This is a Mississippi State team that's trying to bounce back, that's trying to rebuild and try to put everything together to eventually get there, hopefully. And, you get the guys you need, and then ultimately, I think what State needs is these guys to work out, but also hopefully they stick around for a couple years and something you can build a foundation with under Jeff Levy.
Certainly. And look, I think what I like about this move specifically with Kevin Johns, and it goes with Bush Hamden as well, there's a level to this that reminds me of last season where State went and added Mike McIntyre and Paul Rhodes as analysts, guys who were longtime defensive coordinators and successful defensive coordinators at the not just FBS level, power conference level, but guys who had been power conference head coaches and had successful seasons as power conference head coaches, brought them into the room to work alongside Coleman Hutzler and ultimately be a guy who could be another voice in the room, give him some leadership, give him some ideas. And I know in the end, State's defense only improved slightly, fell apart in the half of the season, and you move on from Coleman Hutzler. And it was a move that ultimately had to happen. But early in the season, State's defense was playing better. We did see strides from State defensively. And I have to think having those veterans in the room in McIntyre and Paul Rhodes helped. These guys have not been head coaches when you talk about Kevin Johns and Bush Hamden, but they're guys who can step in and I think can kind of give some of that same boost to Levy, where he can get some different perspective on, maybe how to handle a certain player, a certain situation. Hey, is this a concept we could put in that would be beneficial for the team that we have? Or hey, I coached guys like this at this previous stop. We did this with them and it worked real well. We did this with these guys and it didn't work well. And can you take those ideas? Or we ran into this defense at this point and we ran this concept and man, it was really effective. And we saw teams that like to do that. Having those different voices in the room who come from different backgrounds is very beneficial. And it's something I like quite a bit. And again, Kevin Johns is someone I believe could be an OC right now. I really do. And I'm a bit surprised that he's not. I was really surprised after Duke, he didn't get an OC job elsewhere. So to have him on staff as an offensive assistant, I think is a big deal. Now, the question is, what is the role going to be? Because Mississippi State still may have some shuffling from an assistant coach standpoint offensively. As I mentioned, they do not have a full-time wide receivers coach hired just yet. And frankly, we have not heard much of anything in terms of what direction State's ultimately going to go there. I know the receivers coach from Illinois, Step, that name was thrown around a lot. That's not happening. That was, and I know that's old news at this point. If you're a Mississippi State fan, that's like a week ago. They'd already kind of ruled that out. It wasn't going to happen, if not longer. I know there's other names that have been floated out there, but don't necessarily know if any of those are going to become candidates for State or not. Both Kevin Johns and Bush Hampton have coached receivers before. There's a possibility one of those guys could be a receivers coach for Mississippi State. I would be interested to see if that is the direction they choose to go. But those are guys who have done the job before. If you have to make one of those guys your receivers coach, you can. Quarterbacks coach is something that's come up some. Now, obviously, Matt Holisek is Mississippi State's quarterbacks coach, but there is a lot of rumblings that Holisek could be up for maybe an OC job at another program, or perhaps he's just looking to make a move. I don't know any of that for sure. I just know that's kind of been the tea leaves for a while now. Matt Holisek is someone that might not be a part of the staff next season. And I don't know if that's Jeff Levy forcing him out, or again, it could just be opportunities elsewhere. If that's the case, you need a quarterbacks coach. It was initially thought Hamden was going to be the guy working with quarterbacks. Kevin Johns has worked with quarterbacks too. And Kevin Johns has done a really good job working with quarterbacks. So that's a role he could potentially handle. I'm going to be really interested to see how they split this up, who handles what. But I do think this is a couple good additions to the staff. And if these guys end up having to be position coaches as well, I don't think that's a terrible thing. Getting guys who have been former coordinators to step in as position coaches, you could have some success there. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, because we do have one big move made with the defense. Mississippi State has hired as a defensive line coach Ty Warren from Rice, where he was the D-line coach this past season. This is a guy who is most well known for what he did as a player. Played at Texas A&M in the late 90s and early 2000s, and was twice an all Big 12 defensive lineman, and was inducted into the Texas A&M Sports Hall of Fame. He was a first-round draft pick in 2003 with the Patriots, where he went on to be a big-time player with the Patriots throughout his career. Played in 3 Super Bowls, winning 2 of them. Earned NFL All-Pro honors. Was a team captain for the New England Patriots. Was named to the Patriots All-Decade Team of the 2000s. This is a guy who had an outstanding career playing defense as a part of some of the best defenses the NFL has ever seen, with those 2000s Patriot defenses coached by Bill Belichick. So a guy who had a great career as a defensive lineman that is now sort of getting into coaching. And, he had like a short high school stint as a coach in the state of Texas, found his way into the NFL ranks as a volunteer assistant with the Lions before going to the USFL with the Houston Gamblers, and then the XFL with the Orlando Guardians. Gets into college football in the 2023 season at Stephen F. Austin in the FCS ranks. And look, their first year was not great. It was a poor season the first year. The next year, though, defensively, they took a massive step forward. He helped sign back-to-back top 10 classes at the FCS ranks, and their defense became one of the top units in the FCS with a defensive line that was creating tons of havoc, lots of tackles for loss, lots of sacks, shutting down opposing run games. They had a really strong defensive line with him coaching that unit. From going from year 1 to year 2, took a big step forward. he gets the opportunity to go and coach at Rice this past season. And look, from a production standpoint, Rice's D-line, I don't know if it really got all that better from where it was a season ago. It was kind of a mixed bag in terms of their overall performance. But this is a guy who is considered a solid up-and-comer within the industry. The question is going to be, well, before that, the big thing for State is, one, you're not getting a proven name. And I guess we haven't even hit the big part of this, which is that David Turner is no longer Mississippi State's D-line coach. I'm doing all this talk about the hire when we never officially talked about the fact that David Turner is not Mississippi State's defensive line coach going forward. I believe it was mentioned on this show. There was something that had been in the works for quite some time. It was expected Mississippi State was not going to have DT in that role moving forward. Now, whether or not it is a full retirement or if he's going to step down and do an off-field role, I don't know if that is yet finalized. But ultimately, David Turner is not going to be Mississippi State's defensive line coach, which is something that ultimately kind of needed to happen. And look, I was advocating for a change last season. David Turner was an outstanding D-line coach for many, many years in college football, including many years at Mississippi State. State's defensive line the past couple of years, not what it needs to be. Both from a recruiting and development standpoint, they have not been good enough up front, and it was time for a change. So you go to get Ty Warren. Not a proven name by any means. Not a guy that's got a long track record of doing this at a high level from a coaching standpoint. Obviously, the highest of level is a player, but doing it as a player versus doing it as a coach is a different conversation. Don't know much about him as a recruiter, and what is that going to look like? I will say, though, I think there is something to be said. There's guys who are going to want to play for a guy who was a two-time Super Bowl champ and an NFL All-Pro at defensive line, and a guy who stuck around in the NFL, was a part of the Patriots defense for many years. That's a good selling point to players. And so much of recruiting these days does come down to spending the money and just going out and getting the guys. And I believe Mississippi State's going to be able to do that. I think State's going to have the money. Everybody's saying they're going to have the money, so I have to believe they're going to have the money. Can you get this guy to coach him up? And I think his track record suggests that that's someone guys will want to learn from. I know people would have liked to prove a name, but I think there's a chance for Ty Warren to be a really nice move for Mississippi State.
I think so too. You made a good point though about his track record, showing that he could be the guy that can coach this team up defensively. And, ultimately, he spent time in the NFL. He's a good player, with the Patriots and that whole dynasty, obviously. But I like to look at it from a perspective of you play the game, and then a lot of guys nowadays are kind of going up to the next level of coaching the game. And that's great. But how many times have we seen, and I'm not saying this is going to be the case here, but you always got to be careful when you hire and bring guys in saying, oh, he was all pro, he was Pro Bowler, he was Super Bowl champion, he was this, he was that, he was a high draft pick. Look what he did in college. He's got a good football IQ. That all might be true. But you always got to be a little bit hesitant with these hires and just see how he can adapt. I think with all these coaching hires, I want to see how they adapt to Mississippi State and today's college football with the NIL, with the portal, and everything like that, and the new atmosphere that we're in.
All totally fair. And look, coaching at Rice is a very much different world. Coaching at the FCS level is a very much different world than stepping into the SEC.
True.
I think, look, this is something I talked about with the receivers coach. Possibilities. I just shook my camera significantly. Getting a proven name is going to be tough right now for Mississippi State at a lot of spots. It's going to be tough to get those proven names because there's uncertainty about Levy's future in Starkville. And I know this has mostly been a positive episode so far, and I'm not trying to turn it negative, but realistically, we don't know if Jeff Levy's going to be the head coach past next season. If Mississippi State does not have a good year next year, Mississippi State's going to be looking for a new head coach. It's as simple as that. Coaches recognize that, and obviously guys do not want to established coaches and guys who know they have options and could have other comparable, if not sometimes better options, are not going to want to leave those roles to go take a job where there's no guarantee you're going to be there past one more year. Now, when you're a young coach like Ty Warren, who obviously, I mean, again, this guy's a Super Bowl winner. It's not like he's a no-name or anything, but within the coaching profession, he is still very much an up-and-comer. Young coaches tend to move around a lot. They tend to not have much of a choice. You do move a lot as a young coach because as you continue to ascend and find better opportunities elsewhere, when you're the D-line coach of Rice, you were not going to turn down the opportunity to coach defensive line in the SEC. There's no doubt about that. You're taking that opportunity. I don't know if Ty Warren was the top choice, though. I would imagine there were probably bigger names you went after that told you, like, look, we're going to choose to go elsewhere. Or maybe Levy sees something with Ty Warren and is like, hey, man, I've heard from a lot of people. And look, he's a Texas guy, and Levy's got plenty of Texas connections. I'm sure he's reached out on that, and I'm sure Zach Arnett would have to have plenty of say in this as well. I imagine he's heard this guy has a chance to be a really special coach, and we want to bring this guy in, and like he will make it happen. If that's the case, fantastic. It's a risk for sure. If State does not get significant improvement on the defensive line next season, this move is going to be brought into question. But there's upside. It's very much a high risk, high reward type move. I would have to think, though, Warren is someone that, again, being able to sell getting coached by a Super Bowl champion, all-pro NFL defensive lineman, like that is a good selling point. Like that does carry some weight. Like, hey, man, you can come I can tell you, I was a first-round draft pick. I can tell you what it takes to get drafted in the first round. I can tell you what it takes to play in the NFL. I can tell you what it takes to not just play in the NFL, but to be a part of the greatest dynasty that the NFL has ever had and win at the highest level of the sport while playing for the greatest defensive mind the NFL has ever had. Being able to sell those things is going to be big for players, especially when so much of the decisions do come down to the dollar signs. And if Mississippi State is able to have the money to be competitive to go out for a lot of these players and these prospects, what is the edge then going to be? Well, the edge becomes pro development. Like, hey, we can offer you the same type of money that everybody else is going to be. We're going to be the ones, though, that get you to the next level. And look, again, there's still some risk there because Ty Warren hasn't shown that yet. Because he's been at Stephen F. Austin and Rice. He's not had, and he's only been doing this for a few seasons now. If he had been doing it several years, you probably would have better examples of, hey, man, look at this guy. He went out and turned him into a big-time player. We haven't seen that yet. I will say as a recruiter, Rice this year, which he would be a big part of that, they signed some impressive defensive linemen. They signed some guys that had power conference offers and were able to get them to come to Rice. So I think that speaks well to Ty Warren as being someone that these guys would like to play for. So it's an interesting move. Again, high risk, high reward for sure. But I think it's a move that can work out for Mississippi State. I feel better with Zach Arnett leading the defense, right? I mean, there's that part of it as well. And at the end of the day, so much of it really just comes down to talent. Like, you got to get better players in. And if State does get better players in, which, again, a lot of that is financial, I think you'll see more results.